Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the California Trailblazer series. We are in sunny Sacramento today. Well, at least some of us are. Looks like we have quite a few attendees from the Sacramento area, so welcome, welcome. Excited to have everyone on today's webinar. Just going to give people another minute or so to log in, and then we'll go ahead and get started with our agenda. All right, it looks like we have a majority that have already logged in. So with that, I want to be aware of everyone's timeline here. It seems like we like to book meetings since a lot of us are still working from home. We like to book those meetings back to back to back. So I took 2 hours out of your schedule and I intend to not go over that. So let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who have not had the opportunity to attend one of our California Trailblazer series webinars quite yet, let me tell you that this was originally designed to be a roadshow. We had in fact planned to be on the road throughout California, meeting all of you face to face, but unfortunately circumstances out of our control, so we were not able to do that. So we quickly pivoted and created it as a webinar series. So I think this is number 9 in our series. Things have been going very well, and we actually were asked to add a few more. So this was one of the additional webinars that we added to our series. These were designed so that people could attend one or they could attend all of them. There was never any duplicate information. And so today you're going to hear from speakers that have not spoken yet as part of this series. So we're hoping that you get valuable information that you could immediately walk away with and help you to increase user adoption of Salesforce within your organization, maybe increase some efficiencies of your use of Salesforce, or perhaps even get Salesforce operating as you had originally intended when you made the investment to move over to Salesforce. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Janae Dubois. I am the Executive Director of Growth Marketing for Shift3 Technologies. Today's session, as I said, will be about 2 hours. We will hear from the keynote speaker, Shannon Gregg, followed by a training session from David Akina. After Shannon and David speak, we will open up for a Q&A. So I want to direct your attention to the GoToWebinar control panel that should have popped up on your screen when you logged in. There is a questions section of that console that I would invite you to use while these speakers are speaking. The hope is that I get your questions there, and during that Q&A portion, I can go ahead and ask your questions of both speakers. So again, throughout the sessions, if you have a question about any content that they're sharing, go ahead and type that in there. It's not going to disrupt them. I'm going to see it, and then when we get to that Q&A section, I will ask your questions for David and Shannon. Following our Q&A, Tina Robertson will give us an overview of Shift3 Technologies. And then you want to stay, I'm going to announce how you can receive a gift, because we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend today's webinar. So make sure you stay all the way to the end, and I will give you some information on that. So I would like to start by introducing our keynote speaker. Shannon J. Gregg is an aficionado of sales technology to increase efficiency in the sales process. As an early adopter and adoption influencer for sales technology systems, particularly Salesforce and technology that integrates with Salesforce platform. Shannon is known as a change agent, particularly in M&A environments, with a successful track record of integrating process, product service pricing, and pricing methodologies, and notably global teams with cultural sensitivity. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Shannon.
Great. Thank you so much, Janae. And thanks to everybody who's attending today. We are so excited to have you here. And I got to tell you, this is going to be really fun. David's got some good stuff planned. We've got time for you to ask really good questions. So we are just really, really excited for this to happen today. So thank you, everybody who's joining us. We're going to get started talking a little bit about some of the things that you can do to get yourself ready to make yourself the most powerful person you can be in your organization when it comes time for you to control Salesforce implementations. So here I am ready to tell you all of the things that I have to share in 1 hour, which is a lot. I have been working on the Salesforce platform for over a decade, which is fun. And I maybe foolishly or inadvertently started working on PhD research 3 years ago on Salesforce at organizations, how it's adopted, how it's used, and what types of behaviors can happen or can be used in organizations to get Salesforce implemented and adopted and humming the way that you saw it. So at the very beginning, Janae talked a little bit about how you invested in Salesforce because there was something about it that you really were excited about. You believed, you thought was going to work for your organization, and some pieces of it probably are working very well. But I can tell you, every time I go to a Salesforce event or visit a customer of Salesforce, they say, yeah, I'm sure we're not using Salesforce all of the way. I'm sure we're not using Salesforce to its fullest potential. Yes, we have Salesforce, but we just do not have our arms around it. And I want to tell you first, that is okay. That is perfectly fine. I think there is not a person on this planet who knows everything there is to know about Salesforce, possibly not even Mark Benioff himself. So I think I want to encourage you and applaud you for attending today to really say, how can I learn more? How can I be better? How can I do better? And that's one of my absolute favorite things about the Ohana is everybody in this ecosystem is a lifelong learner. Everyone's open for ideas. Everyone's open to share. And that's why today I'm excited to share with you a portion of my research that focuses on big bang versus quick wins. So if you're looking for implementation success, and that can be anything from major implementation, the first time you've ever put Salesforce into an organization, it could be an integration with a new system, it could be launching a new cloud in Salesforce or a new product, because as we know, Salesforce is constantly changing. So I want to give you some tools today that will help you to make that decision whenever you need to. Feel free to take screenshots, to take pictures with your camera, whatever feels good to you so you can remember the things that you've learned today. So we are going to get started, and the first thing that we are going to talk about is where user adoption happens. So I want to give you just a little bit of a background on what my research has been focused on and how we've been applying that to Salesforce organizations, and we've shared this information loads of times because we think that purple dot right there, if you're a fan of a Venn diagram, that purple dot right there is user adoption utopia. David is going to give you some more information on user adoption, but I want you to keep these things in mind whenever you're thinking about how to really get implementation working in your organization. So there are 3 theories that I want to give you a very brief overview to that will help you understand what that true piece is in the center there, and that's your user adoption. That's when your users are saying, I'm excited to use this system. I love this system. I feel like Salesforce works for me. It's not me working for it. And I will tell you, as a person who was sitting inside of that Dreamforce theater when they turned all the lights off and started playing thunder sounds and rain sounds and announced Salesforce Lightning, ever since then, I have felt like Salesforce has been really focused on making this system so beneficial for the user. How can we help some of our users that don't agree with us think that way? Here's what I'm going to share with you. First, there's change management theory. There are loads of change management theories. And for those of you that have been in IT for a long time or have been launching sales process for a long time, one of the things that you'll know is human beings do not like change. We don't like change. We like to go to the same restaurants. We like to view the same movies. There's a reason why people read the same book over and over and over again. When we find something that works for us, our brain says, I'm turned on by this, I like it, I know it feels good to me, I'm gonna keep doing it. So there's loads of ways that you can help to influence people's approach to change. There's loads of tools that you can use to help them say, yes, I want to get better at something. Yes, I'm open to changing something. And a lot of it is going to be focused on the way that you approach it. I'm going to give you some of that information today in this presentation, but change management theory is a really important component of user adoption. Next is the diffusion of innovations theory. So for anybody that has read Crossing the Chasm, which is a really great book about diffusion of innovations, if you are thinking about those people that they are so excited to use a new piece of technology, they don't care if it's in beta, they love to find bugs. I love when somebody on Twitter's like, haha, I found a bug in Salesforce, because you know that's so exciting. Like, here I am, I found this part of the system that will help everybody to use it better. Those people are early adopters and innovators. So one of the things that you can think about when you're thinking about adoption is that diffusion of innovations theory, which is how can I find the people who are out there interested in using things first, so they can help me find where the areas are in the process. And this is really going to come into play when we talk about quick wins. Who are the people in the majority? That's the center of your bell curve. And then who are the people that are out there that are sort of the laggards? Like, well, I'll wait and see if everybody else has done it. I'm not going to watch Game of Thrones until everyone else has said whether it's worth my time or not. So the diffusion of innovations theory sounds very heavy, but it's pretty simple. Some people love to try new things, and some people are reluctant to try new things. And you are going to have some tools in your toolbox today that will help you to influence all of those categories of people inside of the diffusion of innovations theory. And then the last one is adult learner theory. So one of the things that we know about adults is they learn differently than children. If you have children, or presumably you were a child once, you know that children go to school because they have to. They sit down, they learn, they take notes the way their teacher tells them. And then if you move on to education that is on your own choice as an adult, it's because you feel like you will gain something from it. You're intellectually curious about it. You wonder how something works. You're just trying to understand how to make something better for you, for yourself, not because somebody else told you to. So when you're thinking about adult learning theory, a lot of that comes back to understanding why somebody learns. Now, you've definitely been in the past year or the past quarter or the past month in a training that you had to go to. Here's a mandatory training. It could be HR, it could be a new system, it could be something that somebody's forcing you to learn. And once you're sitting there, you're thinking, why am I here? Remember that feeling. So when you're taking this back to your organization, when you're looking for implementation success, remember how you felt whenever you were learning something that you had to learn. So when you're thinking about those adults, remember there's different ways that adults learn. Some are really visual learners. These are the ones who are looking at this graphic right now saying, oh, that's a good graphic, I understand that. Some are auditory learners. Those are people that love podcasts. Those are the ones that are listening to this right now and maybe staring out their beautiful Sacramento window and saying, it looks so nice outside, and listening and still taking it in. And some are kinesthetic. And you know those people. Those are the ones that you sit down next to or screen share with and say, okay, show me why you can't save an opportunity. So think about those types of things. So when you think about those three theories and that purple part in the middle, that's where the user adoption happens. We are going to first focus on the Big Bang approach. So today's session is on the Big Bang approach versus quick wins and understanding what those mean for implementation. So anyone who has worked in software for a while has probably been exposed to the great agile versus waterfall debate. I think you could probably find people who would be willing to arm wrestle over this. There are different ideas about this approach, but one of the things that's so beautiful about Salesforce is it's intended for us to take things in steps in certain ways. And if you've ever put a change directly into production without trying it in the sandbox first, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So First, let's start with the Big Bang approach. This is one that probably, if you've been in technology for a little over a decade, if you used to Google this, you'd be able to find a lot of ideas on this particular theory, and it would probably show up something like this. The Big Bang approach is a direct changeover. However, the popularity and success of the TV show has made it harder and harder for you to find information on this. So I will share with you what I think is a great overview and a simple story that will help you get what people are trying to accomplish when they do the Big Bang approach. I want to tell you a story about a hospital system. This particular hospital system is known for heavy mergers and acquisitions. When I talked about the change management approach, I can tell you all of the academic research that's done on change management at some point talks about acquisitions because they're notoriously challenging. Well, when you're thinking about acquisitions, if you're the acquiring company, of course it makes sense to you to say, hey, friends, you're part of our family now. We all work together. And oh, by the way, these are the systems that we use. Well, that may feel great if you're the acquiring company, but if you're being acquired, this is a giant challenge for you. Somebody's saying to you, hey, guess what? On July 1st, the old way you used to do everything is gone. And the new way you used to do everything is here. It is here. We're in it to win it. And we are going to love our new systems because they work. They're tried and true. Well, there are some pros to that. Here are some of the pros of that. One, as an administrator, if you have to administer multiple systems at once and you're trying to figure out how to do user help, so break fix help, if your administrators have just one system, it makes it easy for them. So if you're using currently any other CRM system and you say, we're taking you over, come on over, friends, we use Salesforce. This is the instance of Salesforce we're going to be using. This is the process that we use. As the administrator of that system, it is so much easier to say, on July 1, everybody is going to do the same exact thing. So that's a pro, and that's super attractive. This particular hospital system goes in, they buy a new hospital, and they say, hey, friends, on this day, everybody's going to do this exactly this way. And that's what that red line is depicting in the middle of your screen. That's the date. So you get this really nice cutover date that feels really simple to do. Here's the challenge. Remember a few minutes ago, I told you about the diffusion of innovations theory and the early adopters and the innovators. When you do a direct changeover, you don't get the benefit of pulling a few people in who will say, oh, I get it. I can see where, although this is different than the way we used to do things, there are some core benefits to this system. I can see why this is the system that this organization wants us to use. And dear friends sitting around me or friends in my organization, here's why this is going to make our lives great. This is going to be fine. So as you're thinking about direct changeover, you need to consider loads of different steps. But in terms of implementation, if you were saying, great, now we already have Service Cloud and we're going to put Marketing Cloud into effect, and we're going to launch it for everybody on this day. If you've ever done that, I know right now you're probably nodding your head a little bit with a small smirk on your face because you know people are going to find challenges with the system. And if you've launched it to everybody at once, you will have to respond to everybody at once. So think about that. Think about what you have in terms of support for administration when you launch something new. If you're putting Marketing Cloud into place for every single person on the 1st of July, and then you found that there are some fields that were supposed to be required that weren't required. There was some data that was supposed to come over and it wrote to the wrong place. There was some training that was supposed to happen, and there were some people who just weren't in the office when the training was supposed to happen. There are marketing campaigns that are supposed to fire next week and nobody's written the automated journeys for them yet. It doesn't give you the ability to take those teeny tiny steps and say, okay, found an issue, fixed it. Found an issue, fixed it. So while the administration sounds so attractive in terms of saying, I'm going to take all these people, we're going to move them off of this system and onto this system, it's really challenging for you to control as you roll that out and it becomes live for everybody. So when you're thinking about direct changeover, one of the things I will tell you in this big bang approach is you have to be thoughtful about not only how it's going to feel emotionally to the humans that you're rolling it out to, but also how it's going to impact your organization, which I know we've got loads of solo admins on this call today. So the organization may be of one, it may be just you. So thinking about that method will allow you to use those scales to say, you know, here are the pros of me doing this and here are the cons of me doing this. There will be lots of things that you can take into consideration, such as what's the size of the change? So if what you're implementing is a new methodology for an inside sales team, and you know now they need to track lead source and it's got a dependent field that says, you know, was this lead source affiliated with a particular campaign or a trade show, and that's going to be different for them. That is really different than saying, hey, from here on out, we're not going to be using Marketo anymore, we use Pardot. So think about the size of the change as well whenever you're considering using the Big Bang approach and the number of people that it's going to impact at once. So when you're looking at this sort of methodology, and I always just equate it to saying, okay, dear customer, I took your requirements, I wrote them down, I presented to you my solution, you said okay, and I went and hid in my cubicle and drank about 60 cans of Coca-Cola, and I came back and ta-da, do you love it? Chances are they're going to say, well, you forgot that this is the size font that I wanted, and this is the information I needed to collect. And now that you're showing it to me, I just thought, by the way, I forgot we also have this giant Excel spreadsheet that needs to come in too. So whenever you are doing that direct changeover, that's the kind of mindset I like to be in. If I present everything at once to everybody at once, what will the ramifications be on me as the administrator of the system and the change that goes along with it? So there's a famous Covey statement that you should begin every project with the end in mind. So if you start by saying, here's my end goal. My end goal is I want my inside sales team to use this particular drop-down field to make this choice on a lead source. What steps go backwards from that, and where will the impacts be, and where will the fault lines be in terms of the changeover with your approach is way different and way less heavy. I mean, then if you say, okay, great, we're going to switch everything we have, we're not going to be using Jira Service Desk anymore, we're using Service Cloud. Well, that is really different. So think about those steps, and if you start with the end in mind and you make those little backwards motions and you look for all the fault lines, if they are minor, doing something that's a direct changeover, perfectly fine. When you're thinking about that approach, that is the type of mindset you can be in to say, do I want to do Big Bang or do I want to do the quick wins approach? So we are on to one of my favorite topics, which is how to win friends and influence people. And one of the things you do to do that is to develop trust. Have you ever met somebody and you thought right away, I really like them. I really trust that person. Man, I know what they're saying. It makes sense to me. I can believe in it. It is here. What they say is true. Well, that's because they've given you evidence that they are to be trusted. They've either established a presence that has said to you, hey, I know what I'm talking about, and when I don't, I'm going to tell you. Or I'm going to find the best method to do this. Or here is some evidence that I know what I'm talking about. That's what the quick wins approach is. So the quick wins approach is one of those things that is hard for many of us who are technical people because you have to open your mouth and be your own PR agent. That's a challenge, but think about it. Instead of saying, I'm bragging about something that I did that worked really well, instead of thinking of it that way, say, I'm developing trust. People are going to understand that they can trust me whenever I say, we're going to change how we do things around here. We're going to implement something new, and this is the way we're going to do it. So when you're looking at quick wins, what it does for the people that you're talking to is shows them change is viewed as desirable. This change is going to be great. Awesome. I can't wait to move from Jira to Service Cloud because here are all the benefits I'm going to get from it. Change then will be encouraged and empowered, and it will be something that will be contagious in your organization. So, wow, this slide is so heavy in words. That goes absolutely against everything I believe in slides. But what I want you to take away from this, don't read all these little words. I want you to take away from this that all of the best change management authors who have seminal change management theories, they've come out with statements saying incremental change with quick wins is the best way to get organizations to buy into what it is you're trying to sell them with your new approach or your implementation. So in the 1980s, organizational change started to be studied. There were a few things that led into this. There were lots of grants that said, instead of studying how individual humans behave and change, let's look at how organizations change. Let's look at organizational ecosystems, the impact of an organization, the culture of an organization. And one of the things that you can think about when you're thinking about the power of an organization is, how do people behave that work in that organization? Are they still carrying around Blackberries? Are they using iPhones? Are you thinking about new methods to reach out to the people that you are working with inside of your organization? When we all said we're going to work from home now in the middle of March, did your organization struggle to say, we're going to take all of our meetings digitally? So think about your organization in that way. Organizations were only really given these attributes in the 80s when they started to be studied. So a lot of the research is new, which is great for all of us, because if you're working now, the digital transformation is real. The things that we have to do to respond to the way that people work, that our customers work, our internal customers work, it's different. It's different than it used to be. So let me tell you a little bit about an organization that employed a quick wins model for a giant implementation. So this organization wanted to put Sales Cloud and Service Cloud into action from Excel spreadsheets. So they weren't moving from people who had really good methodologies just on another enterprise system. They were using antiquated, outdated, manual, I'll call it paper-based, even though it was on computer, because it was not sitting in the cloud. So they were using Excel to manage a company that had been around for quite some time, that was doing quite a large amount of business and had just become unwieldy. But the idea of switching everything to Salesforce at once was almost intolerable to them. They knew they were working with a workforce that was not necessarily digitally savvy. They knew that their workforce was used to being in place, face to face, and that's what they saw as their reality. So what this organization decided to do, instead of taking the big bang approach of implementation and saying, we're going to put Sales Cloud and Service Cloud in all at once, and all of the related ancillary things that go along with that, right? You know, the soft phone integration, the marketing automation piece, all of the things that lead into that. And what they decided to do was to start with a beta group. So they said, we're going to look at our roadmap, we're going to start with the end in mind, and we're going to work it backwards so that we're continually building on our learning. We're going to start with the inside sales group. We can see them, they're here, they're very vocal, they're willing to raise their hand when they don't understand anything. And so that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with Sales Cloud with inside sales. We're going to bring them in, we're going to have them do the user acceptance testing. So when it's UAT time, they're going to be the ones that are going to do it. And so what this company did by saying we're going to start by pieces is they controlled the transition behavior. So instead of launching everything at once to the whole organization, and we've all heard these conversations around the water cooler or seen them in Slack where people are saying, why are they changing everything at once? I don't even know the passwords to all of my systems, and these are the things that they want me to do. This organization said, we're going to take it piece by piece. And every time something changed, they told everybody, here's what we did and here's how it happened. So now we found that the inside sales team is entering 15% more opportunities since they're tracking it in Salesforce Sales Cloud than they did before when they were on Excel. Now, they might be working the same number of opportunities, but maybe there was version control issues with Excel, or maybe people didn't even really enter things onto their Excel tracking sheet until they knew that there was something serious. They were going to get that demo. That is the challenge that this company saw. But by saying, hey, inside sales saw 15% more opportunities, field sales guys started listening. And instead of them saying, oh, you're ruining my day by giving me this brand new system that you want me to learn while I have a quota that's a target on my back, they're saying, whoa, 15% more opportunities. That sounds very good to me. And they start to envision themselves winning in that same way. So what you're doing by using that quick win approach is you're validating your ideas, and you're able to use that to validate your idea to the other people who will feel the impact of that change. So how can you do this? One, you need to have a feedback loop. Feedback loops go both ways. Have you ever worked for a boss that is happy to tell you the things that you could do better, but never then says to you, what can I do better? How can I make things better around here? That is a closed loop communication. What you want to have is feedback loops. So you want to have a way, and it can be formal, informal. This does not have to be heavy, guys. You can say, hey, look, on Fridays from 8 to 9, I'm going to open up my Google Meet, and you can just pop in and ask me a question, give me some feedback, let me know what's happening. Or you can have something that is as formal as a survey to say, what are the things that are or are not working for you? Where are your challenges? Tell me what's not working with this implementation. But what the most important thing is to give them that feedback loop. So if you've ever done case management in Salesforce or Service Cloud, you know that one of the things that is a best practice there is as soon as a case is created, if it's web to case or email to case, you immediately send them back an email that says, thank you for your information. We will be responding to you right away. And then it's got that string at the bottom that tells them their case number. Guess what? They know it's coming from a robot. They don't mind because you've acknowledged that they've given you some information. And that's what a feedback loop is. You want to make sure that it's going both ways. You don't have to solve every problem all the time, but you just give them acknowledgement. Thank you for your feedback. That's it. So you want to make sure that when you take those sorts of things into your organization, when you're implementing something and you're looking at this quick wins approach to change, that you're listening and then you're feeding back. And then you're constantly telling people, here are the wins that we have. And just ask. You can be bold about this. Just say, hey, what's been working better for you? You can ask them also what's been working worse. But the things that are working better, you want to take note of, not only for your own annual review, but also to continue to build that trust so that people can say, I get it, okay. Even though they're changing the way I do everything. I really loved coming in and opening up my little Excel spreadsheet and typing in my opportunities because I knew how to do it with my eyes closed. Now I see where they're going, and I want that extra 15% too, so I'm going to try my hardest to make this transition, not only in my brain, but also in my actions. So think about every implementation as somebody starting a brand new job. I'm assuming everybody on this call has started a brand new job at least once in their lives. And when you show up to your brand new job, you don't know anything. You're like a little fetus in the organization. You don't know how they do things. You don't know the cultural norms yet. You don't know the best person to ask when you need to get something moved along the bureaucracy of red tape, of expense reporting, or whatever it is. You're brand new to it. So anytime you make a giant change that is an implementation, that's how people feel. They feel like, wow, my job is brand new. Except this time, it wasn't a change they went out and looked for. When you go out and look for a new job, that's intentional on your part. You're looking for something new. When a change is given to you, people think, well, when I started here, I asked them what they did for CRM, and they said they just tracked things on Post-it notes on a giant wall in the conference room, and that felt comfortable to me, so that was what I chose. And now you're saying I have to use the Salesforce Sales Cloud. What the heck is this? So consider, how people are feeling whenever you're rolling out a new change so that you can say, I can already understand what their challenges are going to be and where they're going to be looking for me to give them some of my influence. Because everyone on here, whether you manage people or not, has the ability to influence people to see what we see when we look at Salesforce, which is something that is insanely incredible and makes all of our lives better for so many different reasons. So I want to touch quickly on innovation process at an organization. I told you how organizational behavior and change has only been really studied for the past about 40 years, which means it's pretty nascent. This type of research is still new. There's active research going on all the time to say how do organizations behave. And I think it's important for you to be able to not only keep track of this, but benchmark it so that you can see how your organization changes every time you implement something new. Because I think that's the most fun part of our jobs, right? When somebody wants something new in Salesforce and you get to roll it out, that is awesome. So keep these notes for yourself so that you can say, how can I make sure that my organization can be innovative in a way that feels really good for them? A lot of times you'll be able to see some black and white artifacts, such as if you know how people are bonused. If people are bonused on their behaviors and their outcomes, it's really challenging for them to say, I get that I have to meet these metrics and KPIs, but I want to try something innovative because it hasn't been proven yet. So understanding the cultural approach to innovation in your organization will really help you to decide, what can I do in terms of implementation? Does the big bang make more sense, or does the quick wins approach make more sense based on the way that our organization has shown that we handle innovation? So what I want to show you here is that there are 5 stages in an innovation process. What you'll see is that as you're rolling people along and saying, okay, we've got a new innovation, and you can think of that something as simple as a commission app from the App Exchange that you're implementing on top of Salesforce, or it can be something as large as we're rolling out Salesforce brand new and everybody's going to try it for the first time. So in these stages, first you're going to see agenda setting. So this one is really important because what you have to do is identify what the general organizational problem is. So you understand what the problem is. There's a general consensus that yes, there is a problem in this organization. And like I said, we saw this all very recently in mid-March when the problem was, we got to figure out how to work from home. Some of our organizations transitioned very nicely to that because we were already doing it. And so many of them had to take 25 years of digital transformation and smash it into 2 weeks while they figured out how to make this work. So as you're looking at agenda setting, you have to think about, what are the performance gaps? What are the challenges that our organization is facing that will allow us to enter the innovation process? So you can do loads of things, or this might be brought to you, but you're going to be doing organizational opportunistic surveillance. So you're going to look around, and this is something that Mike Gerholt from Salesforce calls Salesforce administration by walking around, savoir. Now that we're at home, many of us are at home, you can do this same thing on video just by saying, hey, fire up your machine, share your screen, show me exactly what you do when a new case comes in. Show me your list view, show me the actions you take. And if somebody's showing you how they do it and they're making 7 extra clicks and they don't realize you can actually make the edits in the bottom of the screen, awesome. You see that there is an opportunistic gap for you to understand where you can be more innovative, what your approach can be. So really what you're looking for here is that trigger point to say, what problem are we being driven by right now that is the solution that we're going to come up with in terms of this innovation process. So as you start to take this out to the organization, validating it with people, there's a good chance that this innovation that you've identified is going to match the problem. But you're starting to gain change agents as you go along, right? So as you're validating with this people, and again, this can be formal or informal, it really depends on your organizational ideals. You can start asking these questions and people will say, yep, I understand there's some challenges here. This is something that's frustrating to me, and this is something that really gets in my way every single day. Aha, that's your first stage. Your second stage is matching. So matching is when you're taking that problem that you've already identified and you've gained some consensus on. There's some groundswell where people are saying, yes, this is a problem. What you've identified, it is a problem. And then you're going to take that problem and you're going to fit it with an innovation, and it's going to be planned and designed. So you're going to say, okay, friends in finance, thank you for telling me that one of the things that you do every month when you're doing commissions is sit down, take the opportunities from Salesforce, match them up with contract documentation, ensure that the salesperson has entered everything that they needed to, and then enter it into your little green ledger book and figured out, at their percentage commission, how much they should get paid every month, which takes you 2.5 hours per salesperson. That's untenable. So it's a great way for you to say, I recognize the problem. We already did the agenda setting. Tracking commissions in our organization is a problem. The next thing you do is you match it. So you fit the problem that you have with an innovation. Hey, I know about this commission tracking application that will do the work for you. And in fact, it will give us additional benefits. It will tell the salesperson, here's what your potential commission is before you even make that sale. So is there something you want to cross-sell, upsell, add to? It will allow you to do even more things. So when you effectively match an innovation with a need of an organization, will be really key to driving whether that new idea is sustained over time. So as you're looking at saying, how am I going to make this implementation? Am I going to do it all at once? Am I going to do it with quick wins? Making sure that you've matched your innovation with the problem of the organization is going to be really imperative to you making sure that it just carries on. The third stage is redefining and restructuring. And here at this stage, there's the foreignness of what's new starts to dissolve. So it won't feel as unique or challenging or problematic for the person who initially said, hey, you know what? I loved my green ledger book. When I went to accounting school, they taught us exactly where to put the decimals and where, how not to put a comma in the thousands. And they start to see it and say, okay, I've seen it multiple times. I've been around it. I get how this is going to make our lives better. It's going to solve the problem that we have. And it will allow for some watershed moments. So this is where, when you consider that diffusion of innovations curve that we talked about, this is where you're going to start to gain the respect and trust from that majority. So here is where the implementation really starts. So this means all of the events, all of the actions, all of the decisions that were involved in those first two stages really are starting to come to life. So they're coming into fruition right here. And I think when you look at this stage and say, okay, implementation really kind of starts at this stage here, if you don't match the implementation to the needs that you identified in one and the innovation that you've identified in two, it's going to be challenging for you to pull everybody in here. The next stage that I want to talk about is clarifying. So clarifying is when you start to put that innovation into more widespread use. So the organization I told you about before that employed the quick wins technique, where they said, we're going to just start with Sales Cloud with inside sales, they were able to say, we get this, the meaning of this, the meaning of using Sales Cloud, it can become more clear to more people in the organization because we're clarifying what we've identified to do, how we're going to do it, and the benefits that are going to come to them. So when you're looking at this, there's a few challenges. One, when your implementation is too rapid, if you try to do big bang and people aren't prepared for it, you can have disastrous results. So people aren't ready to clarify because they haven't even understood the need for the implementation. They haven't understood why they've needed to restructure. So if anybody spent any time in Los Angeles, there was a really famous example of undue haste, where a new project was implemented, and that was the Santa Monica Freeway Diamond Lane. And they launched this experiment, and wow, was it a spectacular failure, because the first few stages in the innovation process were not considered before they decided, big bang, this is how the freeway is going to act right now in Los Angeles. So when you think about this step number 4, this is really where you want to focus, is to say, is the relationship clear? And that's not to you as the person who's administering the change. And that's not to your beta group who helped you get there, but can the rest of the organization get it? Do they understand it? Are they here? Are they in it to win it? So that's that stage there. And that's really where I want you to think about, is it clear to everybody before you try to put the change out into their realm? And the last one is making it routine. How do you make it part of what they do? So I spoke to you a little bit earlier about the day that you started a brand new job. And they sit you down for the first 2 weeks and say, okay, here's how we do literally everything. And you leave after those first 10 days and your brain hurts and you don't remember where the restroom is in the office and you have no idea what any of your logins to any of your systems are and you don't know what type of healthcare insurance you chose because by the time they showed you that, you were so overwhelmed by information, processes, and choices that you could not make it routine. So making sure that the innovation has become incorporated into the organization regularly is so important. And that is something that has to happen over and over and over again after your implementation. So even if you choose a big bang implementation, you don't just come in and poof, put it into place and everything works well and it's really great and it's complete. This routinization has to continue to happen over and over and over again. And this is where you keep showing people benefits of things they may not have used. Remember at the beginning, I told you there's not a person alive that knows everything about Salesforce. Keep that in mind. Everything that you know, the people who are the users in your organization, they know even less. So it's okay to say, hey, do you know how to move from this object to another object? They can say, oh, sure, yeah, I do that all the time. Or they may say, you know, actually, I get a little hung up on that and I was embarrassed to ask you about it. So making sure that the innovation process is really complete by routinizing the things that you're doing is imperative. And making sure that you're doing that all the time is critical to sustainability. So one of the things that you're going to think about is, will this carry on? Can people do this? Can they teach other people to do it? Will they be my mouthpiece? Will they tell other people in the organization, hey, here's why this is great. I know we knew how to use our old system really well. Everything's feeling really weird right now, but you're going to get some really key benefits out of it. And if you've used that quick wins approach, giving them tangible black and white benefits that they can use to cheerlead everybody else is amazing. Because once you say, customer service agents are going to be able to close 15% or more of their cases because they're able to access the search, or salespeople are able to close 15% more of their deals. That's sticky. That's really, really sticky. So think about sustainability and how you can get people to participate in the change and make it really contagious. That's going to be incredible as you take this implementation and get it into process in the organization. So one of my favorite poems has this line in it, 2 roads diverge in a yellow wood. And I want to tell you, you right now can choose your own adventure. This is a readiness to change model that came from the Hayes model of change management. And surely you've all seen something like this before, but I love this one for its simplicity. So what they're telling you is, if you're trying to evaluate an organization's readiness for change, successful change can be possible when you've identified the need for change, when you have good leadership and direction, and you have planning. Those things are the trifecta for successful change. That can happen. But if you take one of those away, there is going to be a fault line. Remember, I told you before, begin with the end in mind, work backwards and look for the fault lines. These are the fault lines. So if you haven't identified the need for change, if you haven't been able to say, there's a groundswell of information, there's a groundswell of people who are saying, hey, we don't know why we're changing. We're just changing because nobody knows what it is, why we're doing this. Guess what's going to happen? There will be no urgency and no action. If you haven't shown people, this is why we have to move from our ledger sheets into Salesforce, they're not going to want to do it. And they're secretly going to be using their number 2 pencil under their cubicle, writing inside of their green ledger books. And those are hard to find. In the second scenario where there's no leadership and direction, and this is one I think many of us experience as proponents of Salesforce, is it's challenging to identify the leadership and direction who is going to stand behind us and have our backs. So a lot of times we have to create that for ourselves when we're dealing with Salesforce implementations. But if you don't have leadership and direction, if you don't have buy-in, or you don't have a clear process as to where you're going and why it's going to benefit the organization, you'll never leave the starting line. So you might have identified the need for change, as many organizations who found themselves mid-March needed to say, I get it, now we have to work from home, we have a very serious need. And maybe they've done planning, but nobody said, hey, from here on out, our organization, we use Zoom or Google Meet, turn your video on, please. You can have on basketball shorts, don't care, but please come to the meeting, looking professional from the waist up. So if you don't have that, you'll never leave the starting line. People understand that we've got to change, and there's been some planning towards it, but nobody's driving the car. It's not going to happen. And then in the third scenario, if you don't do any planning, and this is one that is the plague of many organizations who are launching or implementing something in Salesforce or with Salesforce, is they are so hyped up for the change that they don't take the time to plan. Planning is not fun. I don't think there are many people who enjoy sitting down and saying, I've got to plan each step along with the challenges that may come, but it is critical, because if you don't have planning, you'll have false starts and you'll go in the wrong direction. And I got to tell you, the best way to ruin everything that you've built up with your quick wins is to go in the wrong direction, because people start to get exasperated and they start to lose their eagerness and they start to lose their trust in you. So when you're looking for readiness to change, make sure you've covered those three bases. You've identified the need, you have the leadership and direction, and you're committed to the planning. The next one I want to give you is when you're implementing that change. And remember, everything we're implementing in Salesforce is change. So if you're launching a whole new cloud, or you're just launching a new process, or it's just one simple field that's moving from a text field to a drop-down field, that's change. So don't over-engineer it, but these are the things I want you to look at. There's 4 things that will help you when you're implementing change. Processes, which are the result of really good planning. Organization and resources, understanding it. Systems and control. This has a lot of times I've seen in play whenever we're doing a giant implementation for Salesforce and the IT team who's sitting beside us as a shadow component of the organization says, I don't have a single person who can help you to install Einstein in our email server. And behaviors. So if you've got all 4 of them, successful change is probable. You can do it, you can get it done, you can control it. If you're missing processes, however, you've got everything else, but you just don't have any processes, your effort will be wasted on things that are non-core. So these special agents will be popping up and saying, hey, I want to make sure that email templates are considered in the initial implementation of Sales Cloud. Okay, all right, but we have to handle the things that are core to Sales Cloud first. So make sure that you've got processes. If the organization and resources are not behind you, and I've seen this so many times where people haven't thought about the number of people that are going to be impacted by it, you will be paralyzed. You will not be able to move forward. Your implementation will be a no-go. And a good example of this is when you say, I'm launching this new commissions application, and here's where it's going in, and it's the end of the quarter, and your entire finance and accounting teams are trying to close out the quarter, or they're being audited, and every single one of them is unavailable for the 4 weeks where you're trying to launch it. Never going to happen. Can't do it. Can't make all the decisions for them. You don't know where all those fields need to feed. So make sure that you've considered your organization and resources. When you're looking at systems and control, if you don't have that, you'll be driving blind. So if you're unsure of whether you can make the decisions, or you're unsure what other systems will be impacted by this new implementation, you'll find yourself driving blind. And if you don't control the behaviors through all the things that we've talked about in this hour, you're going to find resistance, and resistance really endangers your success. So behaviors are such an important component. You know, a lot of us, when we started to be trained in businesses, they talk a lot about soft skills and technical skills, right? And all those skills go into a good employee. You can't just be good at soft skills or just be a great technician. You need to be good at all of it, because even the best technician is going to have to influence and impact the way other people behave. So make sure that you've got control of that as well. So guess what, y'all? It's about to be your turn. You're now completely empowered to say, I can drive implementation excitement. So I put some pictures up here for you of ways that I've been able to drive excitement with implementation. And this does not need to be huge. You don't have to fill out a form that goes to your boss and your manager's boss and the boss of everybody to say, you know, can I pick up $8 worth of stuff from the Dollar Tree to make things really exciting for people? Because let's face it, work is hard. That's why we get paid to do it. And so if you're saying, hey, I'm going to change the way you do your work, I'm going to take something that you're really used to, that you know how to do, that you've been doing forever, and I'm going to tell you that's got to change. Make it fun for them, right? You can do something as cheesy popcorn. You can put stickers all over the place. I mean, there's loads of things that you can do. And I think we should all take inspiration from this, from our friends Salesforce themselves. If you've ever been to any Salesforce event, they make it an experience. They believe in experiential marketing, because at the end of the day, what does Salesforce do? They're software. But they've got, you know, loads of things that make it really fun and exciting. They've got characters, they've got different things that you can see and do and feel and touch that make the software come to life, right? So you now are empowered to do that as well. You can drive this implementation excitement. You can say, all right, this is so great. I am the one who can do this. So I can use all of these things that I have in my toolbox so that I can drive things to be really exciting for these people whose lives I am changing. You know, people have lots of things going on personally. This is a challenging time in the world, all around, so many challenges that we're facing. And so when you want to put an implementation in place, even if it feels really small for you, consider the impact and how you can start to control the response to that impact from the beginning. So if you have the budget to get everybody a t-shirt, or you can just buy a few pieces of candy, or just mail a postcard to somebody's house saying, yeah, this is going to be so cool, Salesforce Service Cloud is coming. People love that. They love that sort of stuff. So you're empowered. It's your turn now. You can help people with your implementation, take it on and feel excited about it, whether you choose the big bang or the quick wins route. Thank you so very much. I'm so excited for you all to hear from Janae again and David, because they've got loads of good information to share, and cannot wait for the Q&A at the end.
Thanks so much, Shannon. That was great. And I appreciate those questions coming in. Just a reminder, while David is speaking, if you had any questions that came up for Shannon, go ahead and use that GoToWebinar control panel. And within it, you will find a questions drop down. Go ahead and type your questions in there. You can do it while David is speaking. It will not distract him. Those will come to me. I will add them to the list. And during our Q&A after David is done, I will go ahead and ask those questions of both Shannon and David. So let me introduce our next speaker. That is David Akina, a certified Salesforce administrator. David has mastered various roles in the Salesforce ecosystem. He's served as a Scrum Master, lead client partner, and a full-blown Salesforce consultant for multiple clients in financial services, security, and software development industries. From overall system strategies to managing large-scale migrations, David has had a hand in every aspect of Salesforce administration. In his tenure, he successfully helped large-scale corporations migrate 25 plus years of data to Salesforce on time and on budget, spearheaded classroom end-user training that resulted in 100% adoption within 2 weeks of launch, and achieved 94% approval ratings from users. Armed with years of experience and strategic brainpower in the Salesforce space, David's commanded project teams, designed appropriate solutions, and managed aggressive delivery on large migrations efficiently and effectively. David holds certifications as a Salesforce Certified Community Cloud Consultant, Salesforce Certified Sales Cloud Consultant, and Salesforce Certified Service Cloud Consultant. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David.
Thank you. That sounds much more impressive than it actually is. But we are, let's see, let me get the right. Perfect, there we go. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much to Shannon for the great presentation. I took some incredible notes in my notebook here that I'm actually going to be referencing during my presentation as well, because I think that they are certainly pertinent to the entire conversation. When I found out that I was going to be speaking in this webinar and found out that Shannon was going to be speaking as well, I made it a point to coordinate our efforts to make sure that you have a full picture of change management through user adoption. And the reason for that, this presentation is called Winds of Change, where the users of tomorrow share their feedback. And if you get that reference, it means you're either over the age of 35 or you've got someone in your life over the age of 35 who shares good music with you. Personal preference. So why are we, quick note too, thanks to Shannon's presentation, I'm going to be changing the name of this presentation from Winds of Change to Winds of Change, based on the quick wins theory. So why are we talking about user adoption? User adoption is like learning how to drive. You bought the car, you've implemented that change, and now it's time to drive it. It is the purpose for that system that you've built. So why then is the topic so challenging? I would argue that user adoption is like learning to drive stick. It requires a different focus. It requires different mechanisms in your mind to do something different than what you're used to. And as we all know, the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome is the status quo. Our users have a way of doing things. They like their way of doing things. And now we have to encourage them to do it a different way. So it's all about developing thoughtful systems to encourage adoption in your user base. There are 3 takeaways that I would like you to leave with today. Number 1 is the ability to adopt human-centered KPIs as an approach. Human-centered KPIs, I've never heard of that. What are they? It sounds like complete hogwash. It could be. This is a concept that I'm currently in the process of developing. It's nothing really crazy out of the box, but just kind of a different lens looking at KPIs, using human-centered design as a basis, a format for how we measure change in our users. Second, leveraging your Salesforce platform for training materials, user adoption, and feedback, all using out-of-the-box tools that exist in Sales Cloud. And third, feedback, as Shannon mentioned, is crucial to understanding the challenges that your users face and how you can empower them to be more efficient and effective in their roles. All right. First of all, user adoption leads to 2 primary things. Number 1 is saved time and money to realize your ROI, your return on investment. And secondarily, the data that your business needs for planning. It's actually really difficult to find statistics on user adoption, but based on the number of blog posts and webinars and training sessions all around user adoption, I would say that the current strategies are not working well. So what I'm presenting to you is a new way of thinking about it. I was able to find some statistics that I wanted to share with you. These are from various websites and various studies that have been done over the years. One statistic, less than 40% of companies report CRM user adoption rates over 90%. Number 2, less than 37% of sales reps actually use their company's CRM, which tells me they see it more as a hindrance than a benefit. Third statistic is 83% of senior executives say that their biggest challenge is getting their staff to use the CRM. And any Google search that you search for user adoption, you're going to find that there are a ton of topics. And again, we haven't figured it out yet. Adoption is really so difficult because change is difficult. And Shannon talked about the crossing the chasm, used Game of Thrones as a reference. In that case, I was actually an early adopter. I was a book reader back in about 2004. So we're still waiting for the rest of those books, even though the show has ended. But in most cases, I am an early majority. I'm not the first at the table. I like them to work some bugs out. But so for me, change is a little bit more difficult than the innovators, not as difficult as the late majority or the laggards. But that's kind of where I lie. So, but to varying degrees, we all struggle with change. Because your users will struggle with change, they will struggle with adopting new technology. Including Salesforce and any workflows that you change within Salesforce. And fortunately, this is a subject that we can't get away from, because 3 times a year, as we know, Salesforce rolls out new changes in our orgs. If we're doing our jobs as Salesforce administrators, then we are carefully reviewing those changes 3 times a year. We are communicating those changes 3 times a year. And we're also becoming aware of new features that we can use in our organization 3 times a year. So because of this, I would argue that we absolutely need a better way to approach user adoption. And if user adoption is a key contributor to the success of change in your company, in your Salesforce org, then how can you help your users to accept change? One of my favorite authors, Simon Sinek, said this: great companies don't hire skilled people and motivate them. They hire already motivated people and inspire them. People are either motivated or they're not. And unless you give motivated people something to believe in, something bigger than their job to work toward, they will motivate themselves to find a new job, and you'll be stuck with whoever's left. And that's the reality. What are you giving your users to believe in as a company? If your users get behind the mission of your company, that will translate to their user adoption, and I'll show you how. I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I was not an early adopter to Lord of the Rings. I was probably late majority there. But I was watching a few years back Return of the King with my wife, and the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, when the orcs are attacking Minas Tirith. You've got Rohan that comes in on their horses, the cavalry. And before they enter into the battle, King Theoden gives an inspirational speech. And my wife stopped and she turned to me and she goes, "Does this always happen?" And my response was, yes, it does. And if you think about war movies or you think about sports movies, there's always that moment before the big battle or before the big game where the coach or the leader is recognizing in his own men that they are afraid, they are uncertain of their own abilities, and he gives this inspirational speech to say, it's not about you, it's about the person next to you. It's not about you, it's about the cause that we believe in. Or there's nothing to be afraid of because you've already proven that you can do it. And I'm going to give you the tools so that you can have that same type of inspirational speech about something as challenging and as somewhat boring as user adoption, right? You're implementing the change for a reason, and now that reason needs to be realized. So I want to introduce you to this concept of mine called human-centered KPIs. And if you leave thinking it's utter hogwash, that's totally fine. So it's based on human-centered design, which I was actually introduced to by Shannon Gregg earlier this year. She came to visit our building in Fresno. And as we're walking through the building, she saw something at the base of the stairs, a map of the floor, the floor of the building that we were on. and said, that is a great example of human-centered design. And that's something that stuck with me, and I started researching it. So human-centered design is an approach that's used in design, whether that's web design, product design, or space design. And here's the definition from a leading global nonprofit design company, IDEO.org. Human-centered design is a creative approach to problem solving. It's a process that starts with the people you're designing for and ends with new solutions that are tailor-made to suit their needs. So it starts with humans. It's centered around humans. It's all about humans. So I'll talk a little bit about standard KPIs very briefly. For those of you that are new to the concept of KPIs, KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator, and it's something that businesses will use to track the work of their employees. So they'll set a goal. Typically, on a sales team, it's all right. Our goal is to hit X this quarter. We know that in order to hit X, we need this many opportunities at an average value of this. So in order to get this many opportunities closed won, we need to have this many opportunities that are open, which means that we need this many leads, which means we need this many conversations. So the KPI ends up being around activity. You need to have X number of conversations every day so that you can hit your goal. And I've been in that sales management position, and I've put that on my team before. And some will be in that conversation, they'll say, okay, let's do it. And others will leave that conversation saying, it's too hard, it's too much, it's not fair, whatever the conversation is. So standard KPIs focus on the activity or result metrics. They compare the performance of one team member to another, and that's not necessarily an intention of standard KPIs, but it's something inevitably that happens. When you've got multiple people that you are grading based on these KPIs, you'll have one that is maybe making 15 touch points in an hour, and then another one that's only making 5. And your question is not, why is this person making 5 and why is this person making 15? But the question inevitably becomes, why is this person making fewer touch points than that person? But I will say that standard KPIs are generally effective in day-to-day repeatable processes. However, when it comes to change and when it comes to really effectively managing change, I would say that human-centered KPIs may be a better approach. They, number one, recognize the barriers to change. We all experience barriers to change, and each of your team members will have some sort of barrier, whether it's just a speed bump or whether it's a mountain that they have to cross in order to be able to accept that change, but understanding it so that you can actually help them through that process. Number two, it focuses on the growth of each individual team member, and it empowers the individuals to accept change. So here is how there we go. Another quote from Simon Sinek. This will be the last quote from Simon Sinek in this presentation, but here it is. Happy employees ensure happy customers ensure happy stakeholders, in that order. I think too often we place customers ahead of employees, and what that means is that companies will sometimes do something that will hurt the employee to help the customer. And when that happens, you're actually hurting the thing that is supposed to be most important, that the humans that are in the office every day working towards goals to help the company's bottom line are now seen as almost the enemy to the customers. It's important to note here that when I talk about happy employees, when Simon Sinek talks about happy employees, it's not placating. I have a 10-year-old daughter who actually painted this, and if she could have her way, every single day, she would stare at a screen all day long. She would never eat another vegetable, and she would only ever eat cotton candy. As a parent, I recognize why those would be horrible decisions. In the moment, she would appear happy, but that amount of sugar would make her grumpy, lead to later health issues in life, and staring at a screen would take away her ability to interact well with others. So I have to make, in that moment, what feels like the thing that's making my child unhappy to make them a productive, responsible adult later on, because that is my goal as a parent. So, human-centered KPIs. Here's my definition. Human-centered KPIs place the user's understanding and grasp of the tool ahead of rigorous activity or achievement-based standards. The foundation of human-centered KPIs is laid in demonstrating the value of the change to the organization, the customer, the colleague, and the individual. Whatever change it is that you're putting in place is going to have a valued impact on each of those four things: the organization, the customer, the person sitting to your left and right, and the individual. And remember, it's the people that matter. I've heard stories of how it's more expensive to fire and hire an employee and train that employee than it is to just train the current employee that you've got. I found a survey to back that up from 2012. If you're talking about a high turnover, low paying job, which according to the survey is less than $30,000 a year, the cost to replace an employee is about 16% of the user's annual salaries. For a mid-range employee making between $30,000 and $50,000, it's 20% of that salary. For highly educated executives, so this would be in terms of the bands of income, it's up to 213% of the annual salary to replace that person, because of the time and effort and money that is involved in actually doing that recruiting, up to 213%. So if you think about it, a highly paid executive that's making $100,000 a year, it would cost up to $213,000 just to replace them. But the cost of training is significantly lower. And I think that's why it's so important that we think about the humans first, that we focus on KPIs that are going to encourage our employees to accept change, not frustrate them. All right, let's take a journey. Here's a map of Middle Earth. Yep, I'm that much of a nerd. So let's say that we were going to plan a trip to Rivendell, which is right here, the home of Elrond the Elf. How do we get there? Now, I intentionally chose a map that is fantasy in origin, because if I were to choose a real map, if I were to show a map of the United States and I were to say, all right, we're going to Salt Lake City, those of you in Sacramento, as I would in Fresno, would immediately go, okay, well, I know how to get there. Sacramento, I'm going to take the 80. The 80 will actually take me all the way to Salt Lake City in about 9.5 hours. But what's so important about the user adoption process is that we don't know what the starting point is. We know the destination, but what's the starting point? I can see where I'm going. I know the terrain, I know the obstacles, I know the dangers, but what's the starting point? And I think one of the errors that we make as managers and as Salesforce administrators is that we assume that we know the starting point of our users. And if the starting point when mapping a route is that important, it's that much more important when it comes to user adoption. And that's where we start. The process starts with understanding your users. Here's what I mean by that. Number one, What other priorities and responsibilities are currently on your users' plates? Is it reasonable to ask for a change now as well? Or can we reschedule this for later? Number two, what is their current workload? What's coming down the pipe that we already know about? If we're talking about that sales team again, and we know that we've got 3 massive marketing campaigns and our salespeople are going to be inundated with warm leads coming in, or they have the responsibility of participating in that campaign with some cold calling, implementing a change right now might not be the best time to do it. And third, what is the timing of the change? What other initiatives, PTO, holidays, etc. are coming up? I'll argue that probably the worst time for you to implement any changes in your org is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving through the entire month of December. Your users just mentally are somewhere else, and it's understandable. There's so many other things going on in life that is a horrible time. And you won't be able to solve for all of these issues. There is going to be some overlap. There's never that ideal time to implement a change, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't ask the questions. And the answers to those questions should give us the most optimal time to implement that change. And don't ask yourself what other competing priorities, volume of work, and timing is. Ask your users. Ask them yourself, hear their answers, because you may be surprised at some of the things that they say. All right, so let's create a plan for how we're going to get there. Number one, it starts with why. Again, a reference to Simon Sinek, but the most important thing is to help your users understand why it is that they are adopting this change. What is the benefit? What, not only to themselves, but to the organization, to the customer, etc. Explain the process, break it down for them. Break down the responsibility of each player in the process and what the value of it is. Third, give your users time. It will take repetition to solidify a change. They have been in one habit of work for X amount of time, and now we're making a change, and it's going to take time for that change to become a habit. Going back to that reference of driving a car, think about when you were a new driver and how you had to rigorously think about every single step in the process. And as you get further along in life, it almost gets scary, right? You're driving home and you realize, I don't even remember passing through the last 2 stoplights, but I assume the light was green. And there's just, it needs to become that second nature when it comes to the new workflows, the changes that we're implementing with our users. I recently led a training for one of our clients. It was a new workflow that they were implementing in Salesforce, a new workflow, a new process for their entire company, and they had hired 2 people to be in charge of this, dedicated fully to this workflow and this process. And these users were engaged during the training. They had one job, which was to implement what they learned in the training in their everyday lives, and it was the absolute ideal situation. That is not going to happen every single time. I have been part of many trainings where you have users that are in the training, but also checking email, in the training, but also responding on Slack or on Teams. And the user enters the training thinking, I'm here because I have to. As Shannon pointed out, adult learner theory, teaching an adult something that they need to learn, something that they have to learn, is going to be different. They're going to be more resistant to it than something that they want to learn. And you're not going to be able to get around that completely, but there are things that we can do along the way to help them with that. It's important, though, that you give your users time not only during the training, but after the training. The training session itself is really just the first part of that training. According to adult learner theory, you've got audible learners, so they need to hear it. You've got visual learners, they need to see it. But then you also have tactile learners. And those are the learners that, regardless of how much time you spend in front of them saying, look at this and listen to me, it's not going to click until they get in there and they start using it on a regular basis. But they have to be afforded the time to do that. And so what that might mean is, as a manager, you might need to reshuffle some priorities to allow for that time. If user adoption is really that important, if the change is really that important, then you have to give your users the most valuable resource that they have, time. Share the data. Share the data that you are collecting through this change process, and share it with your users. Be completely transparent. This is what we're seeing. This is our goal. This is where we want to be, and this is how you are contributing towards that goal. There's going to be both quantitative and qualitative data in there. I'll talk more about that later. But most importantly, users need to understand how that data is being used. If you go back to that analogy of the sales user and they have to make X number of touch points a day, they need to understand the why behind it in order to really solidify the purpose for that change, to really be on board with that change happening. Create a feedback channel. Shannon mentioned it too. Feedback is one of the most important parts of the entire process. And feedback, as we'll talk about, requires so much trust. And so I want you to be thinking about that, and thinking about that, about the trust that your users have in you, the trust that your users have in your organization. And it's not just trust in communication, but what's going to be done with that communication. Talk more about that later. And then check in regularly. This is for your managers, and this is a must do. If your managers aren't on board with the change that's being made, then the change isn't going to go anywhere. That's the reality at the end of the day. But have your managers check in regularly and ask the right types of questions. Ask the users what they are struggling with. What is the hardest part about this change? What have you found to be the most easy part of the change to accept? And really dig down to what the answers to those questions are, because we need to understand, as the system administrators, as the ones implementing the change, what the real issues are. So if it's a lack of confidence, I'm just so used to doing it one way, I'm good at it, I'm afraid that I won't be good at the new way of doing it. As a manager, encourage your users to try. Give them confidence, remind them that there was a time when the current way of doing things was new to them, and they likely had that same fear, and they were able to overcome it just through practice. Second, lack of time. They say, I just don't have time right now. I've got so many other things on my plate. As a manager, you have an authority and a responsibility to then help reprioritize those responsibilities so that they do have time to focus on it. And third, if it's a lack of understanding, they say, I was distracted during the training. I just don't get it. The training document doesn't make sense. I just feel like I'm missing something. Reach out to the team that built it, the team that led the training, and get your users some additional training. Again, some are audible learners, some are visual learners, some are tactile learners, some are great in groups, an auditorium of 250 people going through a training. It's like, I got it. I have enough information now to go be effective, to do it well, and do it accurately. where others are like, I really need one-on-one time. I just have too many questions. And you need to provide, as their managers, you need to provide those resources. And as the builders of those, as the trainers of those, we have those times, the time and resources to give you. So please let us do that. Let me share an example with you. Onward US is a state-driven initiative created by Bitwise and Shift3 to help connect people in need with life-giving resources during this COVID-19 pandemic. We found that there are a lot of people that have been found themselves unemployed, either because their companies shut down or their companies downsized. And in some cases, take for example a driver. The driver may be able to go drive for another company, but in other situations where you've got like a personal trainer, that personal trainer doesn't really have another gym that they can go work at because gyms are closed. So this initiative was created by Bitwise and Shift3 to help connect those displaced workers with the resources that they need. So for this use case, our users are data entry users. We hired, I think it was about 700 people to populate our Onward database. So there's Onward US, which is the parent, but then there's Onward CA for California, Onward CO for Colorado. Our goal is to effectively reach out to all 50 states, get all 50 states on board, including the District of Columbia, so that we can provide as many of these life-giving resources across the nation as possible. So we hired these data entry users to enter in 3 types of resources. One is essential life services, whether that's food, money, shelter, etc. Training for workers who are unable to find work based on their previous experiences and need to learn new skills. And then jobs for getting back into the workforce as quickly as possible. So when we train our users and we tell them about this change, the why. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, workers across our community, our city, our state, and our country are losing their jobs and the welfare of their families are threatened. As an organization, we want to assist as many of these displaced workers as possible to find the life-giving resources they need to move forward. That is inspiring. That is something I can get behind. That's something where as a data entry user, I'd say, what do I need to do? So the need is we need to provide this resource data to displaced workers. We're going to train you on how to find the data, how to input the data. And your part is, if you were a displaced worker, what data would be most beneficial to you? And every record you create in Salesforce will help a displaced worker and their family. So we built this platform on Salesforce. We built a Salesforce community to allow for that data entry. And every record that every user puts in is beneficial to one of those displaced workers. Not just your part in it as a data entry user, but what's my part as your manager? My responsibility is to both you and to leadership. For you, I'm here to provide the tools, the training, the time, and any other resource you need to empower you to complete this task. I'm also here to listen to your feedback about how we can improve the process and help you be more efficient and more effective. To leadership, I'm responsible for ensuring that we achieve our goals and put in the required effort to reach them. Understand that there are going to be times when the work is easy to accomplish and others where it will be difficult. My expectation is to hear feedback on both of those from you. That information will help us design better practices for the future. What is leadership's part? Well, our leadership is going to take the information that you provide and using marketing strategies, media relationships, and developing relationships with state leaders, get that information to the displaced workers who need it. And most importantly, this is where the KPIs come in. You'll be measured on the number of records you create for each assigned region and resource, and the quantity and quality of the feedback you provide. And we'll review those in our biweekly meetings. So this is a conversation that we have with our data entry users when they're brought on, as changes are made in the system, so that they can be empowered to do the thing they are doing and to understand. Because if you think about a data entry job, I've been there. I'm sure many of you have been there. The work itself can be boring, but when you understand why you're doing it, the value of it, not only to yourself, but to the company, but to the person sitting next to you, and to the people that you're reaching, your customers, it's an entirely different conversation. So now that we've got the entire conversation planned, we want to build something into Salesforce. What can we build into Salesforce? I'm going to try to get through the rest of this slide deck as quickly as possible. I'm a little bit behind time. I've been ranting a little too long, so here we go. All right, training materials. You can actually build training documentation into Salesforce by using rich text lightning components. You can add them to your home pages, your app pages, your individual record pages to include the actual processes directly where the users need them. Rich text lightning components allow you to style your text, include numbered and bulleted lists, include hyperlinks, include images. They're fantastic. When you use something like component filtering, you allow your users, you empower your users to decide what training components they see. You can add a field to the user record called hide training tips or hide the chosen training tips. In its most simplest form, it can be a checkbox, and a more complex form, I hate to say it because they make me a little cringy, but multi-select pick lists. Multi-select pick lists would be perfect for this. So you can put into the values of that multi-select pick list the different objects that the training tips are going to be on. So hide account training tips, hide contact training tips. And what this means is that as you roll out new objects into your org, you can simply add that new pick list value to the multi-select pick list. You add the components to the home page, and then you create the filtering based off of that value. So anytime you roll something new out, your users are immediately going to have access to it. Dashboards. There is no reason that you should hide any data from your users about the work that they're doing. Create a Lightning app page dedicated to user adoption, or put it on your home page, and include a dashboard with statistics. In the case of Onward US and the data entry folks, we can include a dashboard on record creation. How many life-giving resources or essential life services, how many training programs, and how many jobs are you posting in there? Not only you as an individual, but the entire organization. So here is your contribution, and here is the team's contribution to the cause. Those are the KPIs. Additionally, show the quantified and qualified effects of that data. Very simply, for Onward, the number of displaced workers that have been impacted by the information that we're providing. That's the quantified effect. The qualified effect are quotes that we receive from state leaders and from users through social media about the impact that it's having on their personal lives. Create a dedicated feedback channel. A Lightning app page is the best way to do this, and you can add it simply to all of the pertinent Lightning apps for your users. On this Lightning app page, you can have custom actions so that users can create feedback, either like a leave feedback button and a request a feature button, and you provide information about the change. You provide dashboards with the quantified and qualified feedback, a breakdown of the feedback, the status of feature requests, and then you can also include the build status of new requests that are coming out. So from these feature requests that we've received, we've decided we're going to be building these ones in, and this is the status. These ones are currently being built, these ones are planned, these ones are ready for deployment, and here's when they're going to be deployed. There's no reason to hide that information from your users. The more information you give them, the more empowered they are to do their jobs. And when it comes to things like feedback, it demonstrates that the organization cares about their feedback. And lastly, gamification. Which of your users are leaving the most feedback? Which of your users are leaving the best feedback? And by best feedback, I really mean the feedback that is leading to the most changes in the organization. So why do we get such poor feedback, and what can we do? Feedback requires good communication. It's based on communication. And if you have open, honest communication with your teams, you will get valuable feedback. Communication, though, is built on trust. Do your users trust you? How have you responded to their concerns in the past? How has the organization responded to their concerns in the past? Best thing you can do is to start establishing trust and communication now so that it's in place when you need it. And you may need to take responsibility for your own past failures in order to regain lost trust. And it's going to take time. Predetermine your feedback process. Start with why. Why is feedback from your users important? Focus on honest communication, and it starts with you. Demonstrate the value of past feedback. This is the feedback we've received. This is what we've done with it. Also acknowledging and rewarding those users for their feedback. It was John who said, this is a change that's going to be important. We talked about it as a team. We've implemented this change. Thank you, John, for bringing that to our attention. We just didn't think about that in the initial build. There's so much stuff that we don't know until we build it, until we use it, until we break it, until we understand the guts of it, that we require that feedback. But so often that feedback doesn't come because the communication isn't in place and the trust isn't in place to warrant that feedback. And share the responsibility. Develop the process as a team. Multiple perspectives, open-minded problem solving will net a much better result in terms of feedback. Structure your feedback. This is going to be very important as well. Feedback should be constructive and thoughtful. When it comes to features, it should quantify the value to the organization, the customer, the colleague, and the individual. There's transparency that, as one idea spawns another one, let your users create new child features. So as a user, I'm able to see all the features that other people are requesting. I can look at that one, I can say, that's a great idea, but actually, let's add this to it as well. So show a new child feature as related to that. Additionally, allow comments from your users. Again, honest, open communication, transparency. Allow your users to leave comments on feedback and features. That's a great idea, John. I think you're really thinking this through well. What do you think about this idea in addition? Or have you thought about it from this perspective? I understand what you're saying, but what about this? Please know that it may require a moderation strategy if this is a new process for you. It's important that that strategy encourages comments and it doesn't stifle them. Watch for tone, watch for passive aggression in comments. Remember that the purpose is to add value, and your strategy should also include an end to the moderation. So it's meant to self-govern, but in the interim, as you may have some disgruntled employees, you may have some unhappy users, you may have some people that are unwilling to accept change, we have to start weeding that out. So very quickly, let's talk through the process beginning to end. We start with understanding your users, plan the most appropriate route to achieve your end results. Inspire your users by giving them something to believe in. Empower your users to accept change. Create an environment that encourages honest feedback and demonstrate the value of that feedback. So with that, we get our starting point, we understand our path. But if you notice these steps, none of these steps have anything to do with your users. This is all on you. You are leading the charge. You are setting the example. And if you are not doing these things, it's going to hinder the feedback. It's going to hinder the user adoption from your users. Remember, effective KPIs encourage users to do their jobs to the best of their abilities. If your KPIs are all stick and no carrot, meaning no inspiration, don't be surprised if you get the bare minimum from your users. If you want to follow up with me personally, you can find me here, but thank you for your time.
Thanks, David. All right, we are going to move quickly to the Q&A portion of our webinar today. So let me get some questions for you guys. All right, this one's a little lengthy, so bear with me. I think I have the opposite problem in my org. I'm an admin and also an end user. We have an IT guy who's also admin, but not end user. He can do magic with writing scripts, etc. If users have report requests, field changes, etc., they should come to me first. I ask questions to make sure the requirements are met, asking the why questions, so I don't always make things happen immediately. However, our IT guy makes things happen right away. His style is, if it doesn't work, he can undo it or repull reports, etc. A lot of my users, whenever they see a presentation from third-party vendors, they tend to jump in wanting to implement right away because the tools look cool. How do I get everyone to slow down and understand implications of the changes they're trying to make? Shannon, David, who's taking that one?
Me? All right, I'm taking that one. Yeah, I think that would definitely start with a conversation with your IT person, so that the two of you can get on the same page. You're both supporting the same system, you're both supporting the same end users, and it's important that as a team you come up with a strategy of how to best accomplish that. From there, take that strategy, and again, you have to be open-minded to the fact that your way of doing things might not be the best way. I personally think it is, but that's a side note. So you need to be open that there may be something that you're missing. There may be some reason why he's doing it that way, that either needs to be corrected or needs to be taken into account as you develop a new strategy.
All right,
Does that
great, thank you.
answer all the question? Okay.
All right, what if I believe in quick wins, but my management believes in big bang?
That is very often the case. Management likes to see things happen quickly and I think really effectively and efficiently. Sometimes more efficient than effective, you know. But I think if you have that quick win strategy, one thing that's really good that management really likes is data and KPIs. So data don't lie. Data tells really good stories. So you can use that to say, okay, write a traditional business case, you know, just get a business case template and say, here's what will happen if I do it immediately as a big bang. Here's what we can take into account if we do it in quick wins. And it also has a greater likelihood of being adopted. And I think just like David's answer for the last one, which is have an open conversation, but you know what? Come with your data. I mean, I walk into meetings and I'm holding this book, right? I'm like, it says right here, I'm not the one saying it, the data says it, you know, the research says it. So if you can come into it and say, I know you want to see immediate response. I know you want to see immediate big bang changes. Here's some things we should consider. What would you do if you were me? So that you can tell that story.
Awesome. With many companies working from home due to COVID-19, how can you ensure user adoption is being met from afar?
Great question. I think taking a human-centered approach to user adoption is even more important during this time. We are, as people, dealing with something that we have never dealt with in our lifetimes before. We're seeing increased rates of anxiety and depression. We've got parents who are trying to balance both their own work plus doing some sort of homeschooling thing because our kids aren't safe going back to school. So, you know, a great example is that it's unheard of to think that we'd be sitting in a conference room and someone's kid would walk in and go, Dad, 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 can I watch TV? But that happens almost every single day when we're working from home. So I think we do need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and say, look, we're dealing with human beings here. We're dealing with people who have needs that are greater than the work that we're putting in front of them. And we need to take all of that into account when we are talking about user adoption. And even post-pandemic, it's going to be something totally different. But right now is the time that we need to focus on the people because we don't have the same face-to-face parameters that we've had for years.
All right, thank you, David. Last question, who is the best person to be the owner of change approach?
Shannon.
Well, there is, that's a trick question because there is no one best person. I probably sound preachy when I say put together a governance committee, but the best way you can spread your message is to make it contagious and empower other people to have your same vision, right? We talk about the Salesforce Ohana, and there's not like one Ohana, right? We're a group. We love it together, and we got there somehow, right? So I think the best thing to do is say there may be a product owner, right? There may be a person who owns Salesforce, or maybe a person who owns sales or customer service or marketing or whatever it is that you're using Salesforce for. But there has to be, it takes a whole village to raise this child. So look for those people who are your early adopters and innovators and see how you can bring them in, and try to get cross-functional with your governance committee as well too, so that you don't become myopic in your representation.
Awesome. David and Shannon, thank you very much. As always, very insightful information, and always getting lots of good questions. So I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Tina Robertson, who's going to share a little bit with you about Shift3 technologies. All right, Tina.
Okay, can you see the slide about Shift3?
Yep, we are good.
Great, thank you very much. Wow, I'm inspired by what both Shannon and David had to say, so I really love it. And I also feel like it's a great introductory to Shift3 and Bitwise. So Bitwise is our parent company, and it's really organized around three functions. Those three functions are infrastructure, workforce, and industry. So infrastructure is, Bitwise said, listen, we want to activate human potential in technology with people and in areas that are not normally thought of for technology. And so in order to do that, we need to build infrastructure. They build a building where small tech companies can go and rent space and collaborate with other tech companies. They rent office cubicles, they rent desktop space. All of that basically creating a bubble of an ecosystem where technology-minded people can get together and collaborate and build great things. The next aspect of what Bitwise does is workforce. What they understand is that people need training, they need to learn how to code, they need to learn practical and skills in order to do this. And what you know, and you've just heard Shannon and David talk about, not only is there the technical aspects of learning the platforms and the technologies, but there's how to navigate into a space. So our workforce, AKA GeekWise, has put more than 6,000 people through that program, and we've helped them get jobs and be prepared to work in the industry. And then shift 3 is the third aspect, and that's where I come in. And what shift 3 is they are a business of all those great technology minds, and we sell software development as a service to companies. And what does that mean? It means that we've been talking today about Salesforce, which is awesome and powerful. So if there's a customer who wants to implement Salesforce, but they need help designing, developing, and managing that, we can help them do that. If they want to do something, their shift 3, Salesforce isn't really for them, we can help them build a custom application. And so we have the expertise as a software development company to help customers decide which one is best and then implement them. And one of the great things that both Shannon and David talked about is, what is your mission? What are ideals? What are people? One of the most prominent ideals within Bitwise in Shift 3 is our inclusion of minorities, women, and other underrepresented communities in technology. We're very proud of that, and it motivates us, and it actually allows us to attract some of the best and brightest talent from anywhere. We have a great leadership team. Irma Olguin, if you don't know about her, you need to Google her and look her up. She creates inspiration for our vision, she executes it, and she helps us really congeal around the why we do what we do. It's really important, and she's very motivating. Chris Hawkins really takes to heart what our premise is. And our premise as a software development company embodies everything that Shannon and David talked about. What that is: outcomes, KPIs, adoption. If you're a great developer, but you don't know how to measure KPIs and gain user adoption, you have a short-lived career. And so what you all know and what we know is that we have to focus on the customer, and that's what Chris Hawkins does, is he makes sure that everybody in our team is focused on the customer. Corey is in charge of our software engineering to make sure we have all the tools and technology we need in order to serve our customers most effectively. And you've already met Janae throughout this series, and she's our wonderful leadership visionary regarding marketing and making sure our brand is out there. JP is our Executive Director of Business Development, and although we're currently started out of Fresno, we really have a vision to expand our model throughout not just the California, but throughout the United States. And I'm on JP's team in business development. But really, what we focus on as a company is understanding our advantage. Why us? Again, take everything that David and Shannon talked to you about. You can boil it down to why us. And it comes down to being able to articulate the advantages. So what we have in our development tool set is end-to-end capability. End-to-end, understanding that we have to talk to the customer and understand their business challenges, and we have to see it through a successful end. And we also are based locally. And I'm going to go a little bit fast because I know we're short on time, but we have a very strong competency in our project management methodology, as you've heard David talk about. The services that we offer really go back to a customer's problem. What do they want to solve? What are their business KPIs? And what's going to be the right tool to help them? Salesforce, we have a lot of specialized expert people like David and other certified admins and architects that help customers walk through that journey and manage that journey. We help customers build custom websites, custom applications, and custom mobile. It can be on a website or on a mobile device. And we do that through a staff augmentation process. That staff augmentation process means that we can embed 1 or 2 or whatever the right number of people is in with a customer and work on an as-needed basis and help augment and beef up their staff as it goes. Or we can do fixed engagements. Those are the 2 most common types of engagements we have. And it's really effective because when you think about being a software development firm, you have to think about flexibility. And the reason you have to be flexible is because You have to adapt to the customer, not the customer adapt to you. And the way we express, and our customers tell us is the most effective way to adapt to the customer, is to have a very comprehensive engagement process. Shannon and David both talked a lot about adoption and the why. Think of the why. So our initial engagement with a customer is about the why. Why do they need to do this? What do they want to accomplish? We do that by first identifying what that is and then immersing ourselves. How do we know what it looks like to actually get to your why? We have to understand your process, your people, your platforms, your technology. We have to really work collaboratively. And then together we come out with a vision of what this new thing looks like. Again, re-emphasizing collaboration and buy-in and feedback is very important. It's very important at the envision stage as well. So now we have a plan, we have a vision, and we're ready to execute. Our project management methodology uses all the best practices to execute on that, and then we go and put out a deliverable according to what we've planned and designed. Of course, everything needs to be validated through our QA process, feedback loops, everything that we've talked about. And in the end, you deliver a product that the goal of delivery is not delivery, it's adoption. And it's reportable adoption. So with that, thank you for your time, and Janae, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Tina. And with that, I want to say thank you to everyone that attended today. For those of you who this is your first California Trailblazer series webinar, we would like to send you a thank you gift for attending today. So concluding the webinar, I will be sending out an email which will include a link to the full presentation, both the presentation deck as well as the full recording of it. In that, I will ask for your mailing address. So if you want to reply with that, I will send out a small gift from Shift3 Technologies. And again, I thank you everyone for attending, and I hope that you have a great week. Thank you.